Saying that the Crusades were justified has got to be an all-time historic low. If we look at things through the lens of history, we find out that the Crusades were more of a distraction than an actual solution to the Muslim problem in the East. What I mean by that is by the time of the 11th century, which is when Pope Urban II called for the First Crusade, the Roman Empire in the West was gone, meaning that there was a very big power vacuum. Through this power vacuum came feudal lords, knights, ladies, think of feudalism. However, this caused a very big problem for the Pope because the Pope was the religious authority and he didn't want any feudal kings to challenge it. However, as things tended to be, a lot of feudal lords tend to fight a lot of other feudal lords, causing a lot of chaos. The Pope simply could not reel them all in. However, with new inventions, things were looking good for Europe. Now, by the turn of the 12th century, there was already the Great Schism, the split between East and West, Orthodox and Catholic. So it's not like the Christian world was united by any sense. This idea that the Crusades were done to reclaim stolen land is also something that's interesting. And that was the question of who was actually going to get that land back. This was a question that wasn't answered. In reality, the Pope wanted to take the Holy Land away from the Muslims, but also from the Eastern Church because it gave him notoriety. And by the way, most of the Christians living in the Holy Land were considered heretics and were treated as such when the Crusaders took over. Another really big flaw is the fact that the reconquest of Jerusalem happened centuries later. I'm not talking 2 or 3 centuries, I'm talking 4.5 centuries after the fact. I also wanted to point out the fact that the conquest of Jerusalem by the Muslims in the 7th century was a lot more peaceful than the reconquest of Jerusalem later on. I just wanted to point out that fact. Another big issue is the fact that Sharia law was not going to enter Europe. The Muslim world was also in a great doozy. Of course, I'm talking about the Shia and Sunni divide. This divide between the Shias and Sunnis was significant because it meant that they hated one another more than they actually hated the Crusaders that were invading their lands. All of this, of course, handicapped any invasions into Europe. The topics of the Crusades are really interesting, so if you want me to go into greater detail, I'll definitely do it.